Hey everyone, Pastor George here. I am back from vacation and I am here with a special presentation for all of you because I know that this is probably the most in demand thing that I have done on vacation and come back to talk about, or at least I found it really, really interesting. And so I wanted to come and share this with all of you because this is a topic that has been brought up in church before, right? I get mailbag questions about it. And I thought, well, I'm going to the Mecca, right? I'm going to the place that is on one of the far sides of this debate to see it and talk about it, hopefully. Learn something, maybe, and maybe be convinced by their arguments. So, as some of you might know, I was on vacation this past week. I did a wonderful road trip with some of my friends through Kentucky and West Virginia. And in Kentucky, there is most famously the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those and what they are in a little bit, but they were there. And so I convinced my friends to go with me to the Ark Encounter. And so I just want to talk a little bit about myself because maybe some people will get this video and not know who I am. I'm, Pastor George or whatever, where I fall on this issue. So I will say that, and it's important to acknowledge bias when you go into these situations as well. So I will say that how I read these stories in Genesis, so you can understand my thing going in there, and also my encounter with this type of thinking before. So I believe that for the first few chapters of Genesis up until the story of Abraham are largely metaphorical and symbolic, trying to talk about humanity's creation, our relation to God, how that fell apart, what we did in those situations, and the natural state of man, right? And you get a lot of there, you obviously get the creation accounts, but you also get Noah's flood, you get the Tower of Babel, you get Cain and Abel, these stories that really help show us where we are as people. And to me, I think they are true. Maybe not in the sense that some people might define true, but true in the sense is that they are true to humanity, true to the way that we think, and true to the world that we live in now. It might not be that they happened literally the way that they are described, but to me, and I will say to the vast majority of Christians, both ancient and modern, literalism is a newfangled thing and not the way that we use as an arbiter for truth. So that's my own biases going into that. However, I also have friends who are strict creationists, right? 6-day creationists, right? 24-hour day periods, things like that. So people who believe in the stories of Genesis literally, and they are smart, and I love them. All right. I think one of the big problems with this debate is that we have two sides. We have Christians who are on the very strict side and the literalism side in their own world, usually talking to themselves, unconvincing to the outside because they're on two different planes of thinking. And of course, you have people on the outside who mock them relentlessly and don't try and understand who they are. Just to let you know, I went with a group of my friends. There were 5 of us. 2 of us, or really just me, I would say, are very observant Christians. We have a few nominals and one person who wasn't at all. And basically, the experience of enjoyment followed in that order. And I'll actually give my rating for this place, but I have 2 different ratings, so we'll get into that. Although people in general were pretty impressed with the Ark when it came to design and things like that. So let's dive in right here. So I did go to the Ark Encounter, and this is how I learned to stop worrying and love the Bible. And if you know what movie that references, then you are getting a +1 in my book. All right, so first we're going to talk about the Ark Encounter, a life, right? History, context, and target audience. So the Ark Encounter and its sister thing, the Creation Museum, is run by Answers in Genesis. Answers in Genesis is a Christian nonprofit apologetics ministry type thing that tries to put forward young earth creationism. I might talk a little bit about that going forward and other variants of creationism, but essentially young earth creationism is the belief that the earth is 6,000 years old and was made in a period of 6 days over 20 literal 24-hour days. There are other creationists out there, and depending on how you define creationism, then all Christians are creationists if we believe that God created the universe, right? But usually it means very strict interpretation, literal interpretation of Genesis in some way or form, and we might get into the other variants. But for all intents and purposes, Answers in Genesis is probably the strictest you can get when it comes to 6 24-hour days, right? And so you can go to their website if you want to check it out. I don't shy away from going and seeing different things. And so you can see their arguments for these reasons why the earth was created in 6 days or whatever. But it was Answers in Genesis, and they have the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. And they were founded by a guy named Ken Ham, who's an Australian. I guess he's probably American as well, but he's Australian because you can tell by his accent, and maybe he's become an American citizen or something like that during his time. But he founded Answers in Genesis and also the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. And when you go there, you'll see video interviews with him and things like that as he tries to present you his evidence for why the Ark is the way it is, and all these types of things. And he's most famous for kind of getting in a debate with Bill Nye about these things at, I believe, the Creation Museum, and maybe also at the Ark Encounter, because I think Bill Nye also went to that. But debating people trying to prove that these things happen, right? And so Ken Ham also comes out of a strain of evangelical, very conservative Christianity. Obviously, I don't think that would really surprise anyone. And that is who the target audience is. So that, they built this thing, and that's who they are appealing to. And I might go back and talk about that a little bit. But this is not, even if they try and present it this way, I think maybe a criticism or a way you could look at it just from a Christian perspective is that even if this is presented as a ministry, right, to try and convince people that the Ark was real in every single way, and to present the best case for a literal story like this. This is probably not a museum that is designed to convince people of that. It really is for Christians, usually for Christians who are already believing in it, to bolster their faith, give them arguments and reasons for why they believe what they believe, but also to convince other Christians to believe in young earth creationism. Again, I went in here with friends, all of us college educated, private school educated, and all of us are at least steeped in Christian culture because we grew up in countries that have large presences of Christian and touched by Christianity. Even if not all of us believed it, we still are all familiar with the story of Noah's Ark. Maybe not intimately as, me or whatever, but certainly intimate when it comes to just the knowledge of it and things like that. And it really is aimed, I think, more at convincing people who believe the Bible in some real way. So, like, let's take me, for example, taking someone like me and trying to convince me that really the Bible should be led in this literal thing. So that's who this is for, right? And here you have my picture of the Ark. This thing is huge. It's like a football field and a half in length and 5 stories tall. This picture really doesn't do it justice. It really is, just on the surface, a really impressive construction. I remarked to my friends how impressed I was by this, and that I really think that, when they built this, that they really went to get the best engineers possible to make these types of things. And it really is impressive in person. And like you park and you can see it in the distance, and they take you in a bus up to it, and you just see how big it is coming up on the horizon. It really is impressive, all things considered, regardless of your own theology or position on this type of thing. And let's talk about the audience a little bit. So first of all, in this age of diversity, as I like to call it, where everyone is prizing diversity when it comes to different skin colors, right, different ethnicities represented, out of all of the things I went to on my trip, which was some big sites in the United States, right, like Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, which is the largest cave system in the world, I believe, and it was very impressive, or Harper's Ferry, Virginia, where you have John Brown's raid and things like that, Antietam Battlefield, the place that was by far the most diverse from lots of different ways that we like to interpret it today, was the Ark Encounter Experience. So you get there and you park, and I swear, people, there was a license plate from every state in the union besides maybe Alaska or Hawaii. but really everyone was there. It was very impressive in that sense. And of course, I heard lots of different languages being spoken at the Ark Encounter and things like that. But of course, when it comes to intellectual diversity, you maybe didn't get all that much because it was clearly lots of families who do homeschooling, lots of very traditional and conservative families. There were even Amish people there. Funnily enough, or maybe Mennonites. I don't know if the Amish would go to something like this. I'm not sure on their rules on this type of thing, but you saw people dressed up in 18th, 19th century clothing with the big beards and things like that as well. So you have a lot of diversity when it comes to probably places that people are from and racial diversity, ethnic diversity, but you do not get a lot of intellectual diversity, and that really isn't a shock. Again, this as I said, this place was built for conservative, evangelical people, right? And so that's who is going to come there, and maybe the odd other Christian will kind of go there or whatever, like me. Although I would say that I am evangelical, just to put that out there as well. But the point is that you're going to go there if you most likely agree with this type of thing. So that's who the Ark is for, right? And it was built as a kind of an adjacent thing for the Creation Museum. And now I'm going to talk about what it is, because I was actually misled in this area when I went. So the Ark Encounter Experience, is it a museum or a theme park in general impressions? So there you got me looking wide because I had to pull out all these portions, although, I am a little chubby, so that's whatever. But there I am, happy, go Mets, looking at right next to the Ark. Again, it was a beautiful day when I was there, and it wasn't a full day. My friends and I maybe spent 3 hours max at this thing, and that's what I want to talk about. So I was under the impression that this was a museum a lot like the Creation Museum. One of my friends from West Virginia told me that they were basically the same thing. And I actually think that maybe there is some truth to that in terms of content, but not in terms of experience, because this thing is actually a theme park. It is not a museum, which is how I told my friends that, and also why its price point is rather high. So we got there. I ended up paying $42 because of military discount, but my friends had to pay $50 plus, and I think with tax, maybe up even to $60. And it is a theme. Those are theme park prices, right? Not as much as Disneyland or Universal or things like that, but you're paying to go to a theme park. And as you can see here, this is the map that they gave us. The only thing it's missing is the virtual reality experience, which my friends and I didn't do. But just like a theme park, you pay for your parking, which is a $10 parking fee. You pay for your ticket, anywhere from $40 to $60. So right there you have, let's say at the high end, you're paying $70 at this point. Kids under 10 go for free, or I'm sure these families, again, conservative, big families, right, would be bankrupt. And then everything in the park is theme park prices, right? So you see my shirt here. I bought this shirt at the Ark Encounter, and it was $20, right? It's pretty good quality though. I'll give them that. VR costs like $15 for an adult. I know, I'm sure the camel rides and the zip line cost things, and they have a petting zoo and all that other type of stuff. So it is a theme park, not a museum. If I could probably do it over again, it'd be really tough because it was really cool seeing the Ark, but it would probably have been a better use of our limited time to go to the Creation Museum to kind of get the gist. But whatever, we did it, and now I have an experience. So it is a theme park, not a museum, although it will present itself as such to the people who go there, kind of mixing the two things together. And as far as theme parks go, and you'll see just a little bit of the exhibits in here. I didn't take that many pictures. Very high quality. Maybe not Disney high because they have, billions of dollars to do things, but really high quality. Better below Six Flags in New Jersey. Really, I would put it up with Disney and with Universal in terms of quality when it comes to like the experience of it and like the effects and all the other type of stuff. It was very well funded and done very well. They took a lot of time and effort and care to do this type of thing. So regardless of that, it is very impressive. It really is like a theme park, and it really better than any regional theme park, and definitely is up there with the things like Disneyland and stuff like that. I mean, there were certainly the Ark in some ways is better than some of the attractions at Disneyland. And I did a little reading and research, and they actually hired some people who had worked for Disney and stuff like that, and in the motion picture animation thing, to do their virtual reality thing here called the Truth Traveler, which my friends and I didn't do, but I did a little research on it. Essentially, what it is you have this little bot guy who takes you on a time traveling machine. It takes you back to Kentucky, at the time of the Ark when it was going to be built. They don't believe the Ark was built in Kentucky, just to let you know, but they're just like, oh yeah, we're in Kentucky or whatever. And you see a dinosaur go by because they believe dinosaurs were there, right? And they're on the Ark. I didn't take any pictures of them, but they're on the Ark and they're in the cages and stuff like that. And it shows you the Ark and things like that. We didn't want to do it and had a big line and all that type of stuff. And my friends some of them were pretty burnt out after the Ark Encounter itself, especially the ones who are not as convinced or not as into it as maybe me, who's viewing it not only as a experience as a theme park, but also from this like, oh wow, this is really interesting, with my pastor hat on or whatever. So we didn't do it, but they also have the VR experience. So it is a theme park, right? It is a lot like going to Epcot or something like that. That's probably what Disney park that I would associate most with this. So the Ark itself and the old religion versus science debate. So let's go in. All right, so you have ground level, which is below the Ark, and then you take a ramp up and you go onto 3 decks, and they have all sorts of exhibits. I'm not going to go through all of them. I didn't take pictures of all of them. I just want to kind of give you a sense of when you go in there what the type of argument that they're making is. So they have a true history of the world, which is and they have one below it, which is like for kids basically. But that thing up there, and this is actually really important to history, is a map that was made in the 1800s of the history of the world by very conservative people that mapped the history of the world to the Genesis story and plays until modern day. And something to note, that 6,000 year thing comes from people in the 1600s kind of looking backwards and working backwards. It's not something that the church really taught about or thought about when it came to numbering the many years in the years before the Enlightenment, right? Before humanity decided, hey, we should really be really scientific about everything, which shows that really, as opposed as these two things are, creationism, or at least in popular culture, right? Creationism and evolution, as I've stated before in other videos, they really come from the same source of wanting to really use this Enlightenment theory to use science and numbers to prove things are true. When in reality, I think that the Bible's a lot more complicated than that. But that's what they're doing here. So you get the 6,000 years thing. And so they present, obviously, it has your thing. So all humanity is descended from Noah. And here they have his 4 sons and their wives. And it tells you, at least for 3 of the pairs, where their children come from. So, if you're from the, the Middle East, you're a descendant of Shem and Ariel. If you are from Africa and Asia, then you are from Ham and Keziah. If you are from Europe, then you're a descendant of Japheth and Rena, right? So things like that. Some of these things, especially the idea that people from Africa are from Ham, is a little bit touchy for me because there's this whole concept of the curse of Ham that was popular in the 17 and 1800s, which believed that black people were inferior because they were cursed like Ham was cursed. To be fair, in the Ark Encounter itself, they have not a whole section, but they had a whole plaque dedicated to how the Bible was used to enforce racism, especially with passages from Genesis talking about, different families and how some can be considered better than others. At least that's what they would say. I would agree with the Ark Encounter in saying that's not what Genesis is intending to do, and racism is bad, and they're very, very clear with that throughout the whole thing. So I don't want to say that that's what they're doing. It's just that's something they have to be careful of. So it goes through and it has different things, and it'll have questions that people ask. And actually, some of the questions that they ask are kind of interesting. So the way it's trying to present the Ark, right, is it's trying to say, this is how, not saying this is how, because they don't try to be that authoritative, but they're like, listen, Noah had to live in this ark and he had to take care of his animals and he had to do it. And so how did he do it? Right. And so they have like cages of the animals and showing you how Noah would have fed them or given them water or cleaned out the waste from the cages and things like that, where there was storage, how they entertained themselves on the ark during the 40 days and 40 nights and all that type of stuff, and how they would have arranged the animals to be there, right? That sort of thing when it comes to it. So they also had questions. So like, how did Noah keep the polar bears cool? Things like that. And they'll say that polar bears weren't even on. If you can read that, you feel free. But they'll say that polar bears weren't even on the ark. The way that they interpret kinds is those, the Bible says seven, every kind, is they'll say it's like a family of animals. So they didn't have to have every bear, they had to have one bear, and that bear served as an ancestor to the rest of the bears on earth. So actually see how they apply evolutionary theory to kind of suit their needs, right? So they'll say there was this bear and then it had children, and all those bears turned into different bears around the world, right? And they do that with all the different animals. One of the things that I found weakest about their argument is the way they define kinds, because sometimes, they would only have certain types. Like there's a bear kind, but like there's also other kinds that I'm sure I could think of that weren't represented. So they're very loosey goosey on how they define kind. But that's what they answer. So they'll answer questions like that. They'll answer questions about whether or not there were unicorns on the ark, because of the King James version of the Bible, it translates the Hebrew word behemah as unicorn. Some they say that it was probably a rhinoceros or maybe a type of dinosaur, but that's what they'll say, and they answer the questions. And it was pretty cool because my friends would ask a question and then we turn a corner and the answer would be there. It's just pretty good. This is kind of funny one. This is just a little funny story about me. My friends and I heard about the Ark when we were in seminary, and we all joked about, well, maybe we should donate to it and call it like on behalf of the Princeton students of Princeton Theological Seminary, because of course our seminary would have absolutely hated that, and like it would be a really funny way to kind of make fun of them, I guess. But we didn't. But you can actually see that this thing was largely privately funded through lots of private donations from people. And so you can see all their names up there and find out where they put their stuff. But that's what the Ark experience is like, right? So you go through, you see the different rooms, you see how they took care of the animals. Very impressive. They have like all sorts of stuff about the ventilation system, like how did Noah breathe, or how did they get fresh water, or all these other types of things. And I'm not going to go in and debate all that type of stuff because I'm really here just to talk about it. And I really think that all of that stuff is not really the focus. We're going to get to the focus right here. Theology and what is really at stake in the Ark Encounter. So this is a thing, and that is the serpent from the garden, Satan, right? As they would present him. And I will say, very awesome design. Just on the front, very awesome design, very metal design for a snake. It's usually portrayed as a very normal kind of looking snake, maybe a little, but look at that thing. That thing looks evil. Very well designed. All right, if I can convince you that the flood was not real, then I can convince you that heaven and hell are not real, right? And that's Satan talking to you. If I can convince you that the flood was not real, then I can convince you that heaven and hell are not real. That right there, if I were to sum up the Ark Encounter in one plaque, in one statement, I would say that is the thing that sums up not only the Ark Encounter and a literal reading of the Noah story, but the creationist argument entirely. Because I don't believe this, but they believe it, that if there is any error, I wouldn't consider an error, but if there is error in one area of the Bible, then the whole Bible is disproven. My many conversations with creationists have proven this to be correct. So the reason that things need to be literally as they are described in the Bible, is because if they did not happen that way, then the rest of the Bible falls apart. And I just simply do not believe that to be true. Because what is truth, right? Is it this kind of weird post-enlightenment, everything has to be exactly, physical and real or else it didn't happen? Of course not, right? That's not how any of us view things that are true. And of course, we can't apply that consistently throughout our lives. And so it seems more like we should go by the way that the church has understood these things for a lot of time, which is reading in genre, and of course, having grace for other things. Many Christians believe that the flood may not have literally happened the way it's described in the Bible, but certainly believe in a heaven and a hell. But it is interesting, right? That is what they believe. And that is what is at stake when it comes to the Ark Encounter. Not, flood levels in Mesopotamia and things like that, but really what is at stake? The Bible itself. And you can see this, right? So and again, this is why I pointed out. What I pointed out earlier, in case you need a refresher, is that who is this about, right? It's about Christians being convinced to think in young earth creationist way. And so they present the other two big schools of thought, which is kind of like the Francis Collins school that I would put myself in, which is like theistic evolution, right? God-guided evolution, things like that, and old earth creationism. And so here they attack my position, I guess, right? Which is naturalistic thinking, things like that. I guess you could also consider this, they'll just kind of lump it in with just the general belief in evolution or whatever. But it'll say the worst of both worlds, right? Some people attempt to combine aspects of biblical creation with evolution in millions of years. This idea contradicts the Bible at numerous points, including the following: death entering the world when Adam sinned, which they get from Romans, thorns and thistles originating with the curse, Genesis 3:18. Man and woman are created at the beginning of history, Mark 10:6, right, when Jesus talks about marriage and things like that. You have that type of things, and I think like if you are on that train, you need to have answers for these things. I'm not going to present mine now because this isn't a rebuttal. This is just a review or experience thing of, right? But these are good questions, right? And things we need to think about if you take the Bible seriously. But each of these details, as they say, are necessarily denied by old earth perspectives and end up undermining the truth of Scripture. If we cannot believe God concerning how he made the universe, then why should we believe him about salvation offered through Jesus Christ, right? So you can see that they think that, Genesis is the cornerstone, and when you remove that, the rest of Scripture falls in a cascade. So that's what they are saying. Now, one could say, just, is Genesis meant to be a history of someone the same way the Gospels are meant to be, or is it meant to be something else? And that's where you can get in debate about genre, things like that. Here we see them attacking the old Earth position. So there's young Earth, right, which is 6,000 years. Old Earth, which believes it's millions of years old, and that the Earth was created in like day ages or something like that. And that evolution kind of happened, and then you have then you have, or not evolution, maybe necessarily, but things happened, and then you have Adam and Eve and the creation's narrative and things like that. And they try and use science to show that the Earth wouldn't have been able to, the Ark wouldn't have been able to float or things like that because of these types of things. And so you have the old Earth position attacked here. So they're attacking another way of Christians interpreting Genesis stories that aren't completely literal, things like that. And this is my favorite one because this also leads into where we're going here and how we think about the Ark in general. And so this is a part of the Ark experience called the Fairy Tale Ark. And I was thinking of Miss Kathy. For those who don't know, Miss Kathy teaches our children's program here and things like that. And I always go back and forth with her, and I hope she understands this in a funny way, where I'll ask her like what Bible story she's teaching, and if it happens to be something, like David and Goliath or something, I'll be like, oh, do you talk about the part where he cuts off Goliath's head and parades it around, right? Because I think it's funny that, we do sanitize these stories for children, either because we want to protect them, from maybe things that they can't understand, or we believe that it will traumatize them or something like that. And this is actually a way I kind of agreed with part of what the Ark is doing here. So they have the Fairy Tale Ark. And you go into the room. This is from the floor above it because I couldn't really get a good shot of this nice damn diorama here. And you can see below it, you see books in there, right? And like a little play set. And you go in there and it's just a room full of books about Noah's Ark that kids get, like the little books you can pick up at Christian bookstores or maybe in, Walmart and Barnes and Noble and stuff like that tell the Noah's Ark story in a way that's for kids, and you can see the animals up there, and they even do the whole thing where they have male and female, and you can tell it's a male or female animal whether or not they have eyelashes, because if they have eyelashes, it's a female, right? Stuff like that, which is kind of a nice little funny touch. And you go in there and you see all these books, and in the middle of it they have this thing. They have a little book that has a little poem, and it's hard to read, so I'll read it for you. Once upon a time there was an old man of God. His name was Noah, and his task was quite odd. One day the Lord said to build a little boat. Make it nice and cute, but who cares if it will float? Be sure to make room for an elephant or two, and for monkeys and giraffes in your floating wooden zoo. It will rain quite hard for 40 days and nights, 'cause men are so mean and have started many fights. So kind old Noah built his little wooden ark, and all of his friends laughed when told about his lark. The rain beat down, and the dark clouds loomed, the lightning flashed, and the thunder boomed. All of the creatures were packed tight into the ship, but when the first waves hit, Noah's boat did a flip. The ark was demolished from floorboard to rafter, and no man or beast lived happily ever after, right? And they'll say that you prep kids to have them undermined about the truth of the ark by teaching them that it was just about Noah saving all of these cute animals that they can see in the zoo. And instead of trying to tell the kids that this is a literal thing that happened, to show them how the ark could sustain all of this wind and damage, which they do in the museum or the experience, whatever you want to encounter, things like that. And instead, and not focusing on the judgment that God brings. And so they have the 70s of deception there as well, which I don't have a picture of, but you have there kind of the source. And it is from that picture, right? You're kind of in the center of the room, and you turn to the left, and then you see this again, right? If I can convince you that the flood was not real, then I can convince you that heaven and hell are not real. And there you go. That is the theology of the Ark Encounter. So the takeaway, what did we all learn? Well, what did we learn? I will give you my experience rating. So as a theme park, as an experience, right? As something you go do, I gave it like an 8. It is very impressive. There's a lot to do there. You could spend a whole day there with your family or whatever, if you wanted to, right? It is up there with a lot of the best theme parks in the United States when it comes to just time and effort put into it. For theology, though, I do believe that it is very not convincing. My friends ended up either going with the route of, well, I don't believe it, and I didn't find it convincing on that area, but I did really find it impressive as a construction or whatever, and saying, it was kind of cool in that way. But like many of them were very skeptical going in, and even more skeptical coming out, and actually probably even more turned off to the idea because of the way that it's presented as a theme park, right? Where it seems like they're trying to money gouge you at every opportunity, right? It seems as though it's religion, just disguised, just capitalism disguised as religion, taking money from people in order to give a product to them, right? And that was kind of sad. And I don't think that that's what Answers in Genesis intends, but that is very much kind of what is happening in some instances there. No one was convinced of this type of thing, and that's partly because it really isn't designed to convince. Well, I think it's mainly designed to bolster and maybe get some Christians who are younger, older, and evolutionary theists to move into their camp. But it really was in that way disappointing. And I did find their broad strokes theology in this area to be pretty off-putting. Of course, there's much to commend about it when it comes to it as an experience, but ultimately, I think it ends up hurting Scripture rather than helping it. Because to me, what it came off as fan fiction. Fan fiction, for those of you who do not know, is a genre of internet writing where you take characters from fiction and you have them do your own stories, right? You like Star Trek, you write your own Star Trek story, or you insert your own things to make it better, right? That's fan fiction. And that's what the Ark Encounter was like, right? Because at the end of the day, there are 2 chapters about Noah in Genesis, right? And what they did is they went in there and they said all of these things had to have taken place, and Noah had to know these things, like about ventilation systems, right? About clean water filtration and things like that. And the very fact of the matter is that people in the ancient world at that time did not care about these things, right? God gives him the dimensions of the ark and tells him to build it in Genesis, right? And it is impressive to see that lived out. But people did not care about ventilation. They did not care about water filtration systems, right? What it is it's taking problems begun by the modern age and reading them into Genesis. I think a stronger argument would honestly just be to say it's a miracle, right? The animals came, Noah was able to take care of them through the miracles of God, and that's how it happened, right? But the unfortunate thing is it takes all the emphasis off of the story, right? What is Noah's Ark actually about? Is it about building an ark and getting animals in it? No, right? It's not. Noah's Ark is about the judgment of God on wicked people, but his constant love for us, that even when the world was wicked, he preserved people, right? And then, even though they would go on to do wicked things again, he made a covenant saying that he would not destroy the earth again, right? That's by flood. That's a big deal, right? That is an important thing to talk about in church. That is an important story to read and transmit to your kids, and focusing on the justice and judgment of God and also his mercy towards people, right? That is really the takeaway that one should leave with the story of this. But really, it ended up coming more off as fan fiction and desperately trying to make the science and the Bible fit together. So it was really sad in that way. So yeah, I can't say one way or another if you should go. It's up for everyone in their own opinion to go and make it themselves, make the pilgrimage to the Ark Encounter themselves. They're going to build a Tower of Babel at some point there too, and it's such a fascinating thing for me from a sociological and religious perspective that I would probably go back even after what I just said, just to see what they do. But it really is interesting. And so I don't know. Make your own decision. And check it out if you want to. Don't check it out if you don't want to. You can just use this video. I know this one's long. I don't have the time in front of me. I'm sure it's going to be long, but I'm glad that you guys are listening. Hopefully you found this interesting. I will see you guys tomorrow for Bible study and then Thursday for the mailbag. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and peace out.